Hey, Tom.
Glad to see it actually worked this time. Goodness. That was really frustrating earlier.
It looks like we've already got about 10 people signed on. Do you want Elena and Will to be brought in as panelists? What do you prefer?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that way they can comment or, they, I guess I don't know what the difference is, but I let them in.
Okay, I'm just gonna check my email to see if anybody's emailed that they need the link or anything.
Is there a way to let people turn their cameras on?
Well, so we set this up as a webinar, which means that that's what it means to bring the three of you in as panelists. So you're sort of taking over, and I made you the co-host, and then everybody else is off camera unless you want to bring somebody in specifically.
Okay.
Which we can do at any time.
Okay. I was thinking it's nice to feel like I'm talking to a group of people, not just a computer screen, but I've done it a few times now, so I can deal with it.
Look, see, there's Will.
Yeah, he's here to be supportive.
And Elena. Okay.
I call them the experts.
So I think as people come in, they'll just automatically join. I won't need to do anything with a webinar format. So I'm just going to hand it over to you and you can go ahead and get started.
Excellent. Well, in that case, welcome everyone to the second round of the public engagement, part of the public engagement process for the Grantham Village School kind of play space outdoor site project. We met with you all about a week ago to go over kind of initial analysis takes and get initial feedback. And I've worked over the past week to develop the concepts that we're going to review this evening. The students at the school had an opportunity to hear a brief presentation, pre-recorded presentation of the concepts and provide some feedback with their teachers and their classes. We met with the faculty at the end of their long day earlier this afternoon, and they've got their own survey. So now all that's left is presenting the concepts to you all, and hopefully, having a bit of a discussion and Q&A at the end of this. And then there's also a supplemental survey, which Sydney, if you've not already sent out to the group, that'd be great, and to make it available either through the school website or social media. So really the intent of tonight is to present the two concept options that we have developed for the site, to review those, to ask questions about them, and ultimately what we're trying to get by the end of this week would be some consensus among the school and Grantham community on the preferred concept, the preferred style of equipment, and that is what we're going to bring forth in terms of moving slowly in the process of developing the site plan to a level where we can put a budget number together and work on, initial phase of work that would be part of the bond vote in early March. I'm now going to attempt to bring up the presentation. All right. There we go. Can you guys see? Excellent. All right, well, as I said, looking at the Grantham Village School outdoor play space, from an overall schedule standpoint, we are kind of in this area here with public engagement number 2. Obviously, we're this is the week of January 17th, so we're on the 20th. And so, we've gone through this initial site assessment and concept work, and now are, in the process of doing our public engagement. And then, as I said earlier, the next step is to work through the schematic design, ultimately trying to get, the preferred plan and initial estimate for that project together by, early February, ahead of the bond vote, which will occur at the beginning of March. So, as I mentioned earlier, we met about a week ago and presented initial concept analysis. We also had some surveys that we sent out and received feedback. And really the intent was to identify what the priorities were in terms of the playground and the play space and the outdoor space, and what you were all looking for in terms of improvements and what you saw as deficiencies. And so through that process, we were able to identify some key takeaways, what we say are key takeaways. Things such as, that the play area really isn't kind of appropriate currently for all levels of students and the type of play they're doing. And so there was this desire to make, a developmentally appropriate play selection of activities and equipment for all the students at the school. You can see here too on this slide, this was polling, I believe, the students, and, the idea that more play options was one of the highest rated responses that they were looking for on this playground, as well as let's have some shade and accessibility to the various aspects of the play area, and then slides are important, and lower priority for more open lawn space. And then, a big one too is this idea of year-round play options. And we've had several rounds of discussions now with parents and the faculty about the fact that once the existing mulch within the play area gets clogged with water and freezes in the winter and snow, you shut the equipment down and it becomes off limits to the students, and then their options are much more limited to sledding down the hill or making a snow fort somewhere on the site. So really what we're looking for is ways technically from the design to help mitigate some of the drainage issues that are happening and the freezing as best we can of the mulch. Well, I won't say that we'll totally eliminate that. What we're really trying to do is extend those seasons and extend the usable time frame for the equipment so that kids can use it for a longer period of time, while also providing additional options for what they can use if it is winter out, and if the ground is frozen, that there's still things that they can do and feel entertained by, feel creative, even if it's loose parts or some other activity they can do that helps with their creativity and expression. And then as I did mention, alleviating drainage concerns. There were issues around, the bottom of the slope, the toe of the slope, where there wasn't enough drainage, and hearing that, that turns into basically a skating rink with ice. And then also really critically seeing the limited access into the play area and how everyone's focused at some of the gate areas. And that's what's getting really compacted and turning into ice. And so trying to look at ways to open up the access to the play area so that it's not so focused, and help alleviate, alleviate some of the compaction of the snow or creation of mud in the spring and fall by having all the kids going in one spot. The other idea is maximizing underutilized space. And so in this instance, are we able to rethink the tennis courts and how that space is used and make it into a more usable, more productive part of the play area and the play space for the kids. Also thinking is, are there ways we can turn it into a learning space as well? And then finally, creating pedestrian friendly and accessible site and playground. We recognized early on that this existing play area is all the way across the field. It doesn't have any pedestrian access, so it's not accessible. It has a curb which prohibits people from getting into that area and being able to kind of access the equipment. So looking at ways that through the design we can provide that accessibility. And then finally, incorporating natural elements and materials. And really, as I kind of finished off last time, you guys are very much surrounded by nature. You're in a really beautiful area with the nature trails and the rivers and brooks flowing through there. And is there a way we can express that in a way through the site design and the playground design? So those are the main key critical points that we're trying to hit in both of the options. And we'll get into how each of the options tries to touch on each of these points. So as we started kind of transitioning out of the analysis phase and thinking about the concepts and what sort of theme or story would organize the concepts on the site and really kind of create some strong undertones, we started looking at what is some inspiration we could dig into. And this kind of classic valley and rolling hill landscape of which Grantham sits at the base in a valley of where the brooks and streams are flowing in between some hills. And so we have this valley landscape as one inspiration piece. And then the idea of all the hiking that's available within New Hampshire and even on the property with the trails, and the idea that hiking is very much about a journey and getting to a summit in many cases. And then even thinking about industry and how all the mills and the historic lumber industry in the town and in the area could lead to some of the form and the materials that we see. And then finally, within the valleys, the idea of kind of open fields and rolling hills and ways to use that in terms of an inspiration for some of the formation of the overall site design. So that's where we were drawing some of our inspiration from. And then from there we say, all right, how can we translate that into a vision for what this play area and play space will be? And so we have the idea of modern organic forms, whether it's linear kind of strong axes or softer curving formations, kind of offsetting lawn areas with mounds and grasses, as well as the idea of wood, lots of wood, right? We have through the concepts looking at juxtaposing the idea of using wood equipment with more steel equipment. And as I mentioned in the faculty meeting, I was definitely very taken by some of these wood pieces and wood towers, and thinking just how it fits and feels so appropriate within Grantham. Not that I'm trying to make a pitch, but that was my take. And then the idea of vantage points, again, from the idea of hiking. The kids love to be elevated, and there is the small slope up against Learning Drive, but for the most part, that site is very flat, and kids really enjoy, undulations and changes in grade and opportunities to be able to kind of be above and looking out at others. And so are there ways either through the site design or the equipment that we can give them that opportunity? When I switch slides, is there any delay, or are we keeping up pretty well? Looking at you, Elena. We're good. All right. I know the last time things lagged a little bit. All right. So concept A. So this is our first concept, and really the idea with this one, and you may remember that I touched on the idea of permaculture at the analysis, and the idea that, all right, closer to the school is where you have more of your core kind of intensive uses, and that as you get further away, the uses start to, get less intense, and it's places you may not go to as frequently or, for as important a reason. And so the overall idea with this one is, all right, let's create kind of this hive of activity. And really, as you're coming up Learning Drive and coming at the entry, really using this tower piece in this upper playground as kind of an icon of the entry into the school. And so you see this tower kind of right at the entrance to the school. And so that becomes kind of the foundation of this plan, where the various kind of active playground play activities are located, basically in the cup of, the school architecture. And, given the way the sun comes up in the east and rotates around, all those are getting really good sun exposure. And additionally, this plan is the one that does most in terms of taking out and reworking some of the existing conditions. So at the main entrance to the school, currently what you have is, you can see this line here is the edge of the curb line, right? And so you have a drive lane that comes through here, and you park all the way through here, right? So, we talked early on about how, this kind of entrance to the school feels somewhat constrained and the sight lines aren't great. And so really what we looked at is, can we actually pull these islands over, take over some parking, pull the drive aisle over, make that very much, continue to be one way, but then put this big pedestrian, arrival plaza in line with the covered, alcove, the portico, as you go back towards the main entrance of the school. So now you have very much a proper kind of drop off, arrival and departure, plaza, plenty large enough for kids to wait. There's a big long bench for them. And so now you've kind of cleaned up that entrance into the school and hopefully helped with some circulation issues. And then, additionally, what that does is it gains us a little bit of additional room and space for the playground to be able to pull that over a bit more. The other kind of major change was saying, all right, let's take most of both of the tennis courts out, convert that over to a field space, cut that court back enough to be able to, recreate the 4 square courts that are currently undersized, put in some regulation size 4 square courts associated with the basketball court, but for the most part, generate enough space that now you can put the main soccer field over in place of where the tennis courts are. So the key to this one is that, really we're looking, in addition to the entrance and the tennis courts, we're looking at a really comprehensive upgrade to the site circulation. While the form is, very much in line with kind of where these walkways exist currently, we're really trying to increase the width of this main kind of axial walkway here that, is really one of the primary ways to get into the core of, this school here, as well as into the playground on this main axis here as well. And trying to do things like, cut the corner of this garden bed off, maintaining all the existing mature trees, but allow kids to come out of the main axis of the school and then immediately bend into the playground. And that eliminates, you see that little bump in the fence right there. That's where all the kids are channeled through right now. So we're pulling it away from, some of that existing wastewater, manholes and covers, pulling them away from that equipment, allowing them to kind of flow more broadly into the playground and create a stronger relationship back to the school, as well as the entry. And then we have bike racks kind of lining the backside of that fence there, and as well as an additional entrance, sidewalk that comes in from the plaza right through here. Then within the interior of the playground, we have a connection, a walkway connection that comes from the additional parking here, comes through, as well as from this far parking lot here and comes through, and those are running parallel to each other. And really what that starts to do is create this kind of interweaving network of, sidewalks, this big kind of teardrop shaped racetrack, as I call it. And that's starting to define some of these spaces even more. So you have, the younger kids play area right here, a swing set that's independent and separated by the pathway network. And then, the playground that's geared towards the older kids over here. And so you've got, these two kind of well-defined play areas providing more play equipment, more options, more space overall for all the grades, as well as more interest. And then finally, the pavilion that's, that Yankee Timber has offered is located here. Approximately, I understand where historically the school has constructed a tent for some outdoor covered space. So that pavilion is here. It also has additional kind of open paved area working off of those two existing trees, one of which I believe was in honor of a prior faculty member. And so really building off of that line of trees with more additional trees, creating basically a covered covered by the canopy seating area in association with the pavilion. So you now have all the space under the pavilion, as well as some outdoor space, for additional picnic tables for lunch, or a few classes to come together for a workshop or an outdoor class. So that's the intent of that. And then, as I did mention already, this teardrop track, which comes and kind of circles this open multi-purpose lawn space. So the point of this, the other point of this concept is that you have more of a flexible space here, and then the defined soccer space here. So it does create more field, but the intent of that was that you might have a gym class out here while you still have kids wanting to use the majority of the playground concurrently. So this gives the PE class a place to go and use, while also allowing multifunctional field as well as play space for the rest of the classes that are out there for lunch. And then finally, at the end of the field, we've kind of increased the width, trying to create a flat spot as this pathway, this accessible pathway comes up. That becomes basically a benched shoulder coming up the existing slope. And so we're pulling that hill out a bit, increasing the height of it a little at this end here. This is right behind where the existing playground is. You can very slightly see the outline of that here. And so that creates this area for, these hill embankment slides to be on the side of this slope here. So you can take that journey, get up to this high point here, look out over the entire play area, slide down, make that into a circuit. There's some little stepstone they can come up that way. But then as you transition this way, the kids can come up, be on the sidewalk to put their sleds down in the winter, and then sled down and not have to cling to the fence as they do currently. All right, so we have just enlargements of each of these. So I've talked about a lot of this already, but this allows us to go into a little bit more detail. So understanding how, trying to incorporate some accessible walkways and accessible parking in the parking lot, which is modified to come across. Then you have, as I mentioned already, the entrance plaza into the school, some bench seating, long kind of linear bench seating there. For kids to wait as they're waiting to get picked up. And then that's backdropped by some landscape and the fencing that encloses, this upper playground here. And then you have, separation between the play area and this, circulation and arrival space here by a rain garden, in between. So all this plaza space can now kind of drain and flow this way into this rain garden. And we'll under drain the play area and the play mulch to help alleviate that drainage issue that we talked about at the beginning. There's also options for benches, trash and recycling. There's places for those proximate to the entrance into the school, as well as an outdoor drinking fountain, so that when it's hot outside, the kids, they probably bring their water bottles out, like mine do when they go out for recess, but they also have a place to either refill them, or if they forget their bottles, there's there's an outdoor spot to get some water. So imagery for the entry, thinking about ideas for, again, rain gardens and kind of the type of planting that would occur, possibly considering permeable paving even within the entrance plaza to be able to infiltrate the water where it lands directly into the ground. There's really good sandy soils here, so we're able to look at perking some water right into the ground rather than trying to get into drains and catch basins and put it into the big drainage pond in the back. And then again, the diagonal walkway that kind of is widened and increased on the diagonal, thinking that could be the memorial brick walkway where all the bricks that you're selling with names engraved could be incorporated into that walkway and really celebrate everyone who added and donated to the intent of the playground. And then again, the idea of linear benches, whether it be out of wood or in this instance, showing this big kind of monolithic concrete bench. And then of course, the water fountains and new bike racks. So this is an enlargement of what we're calling the K-1 play area, as well as the pavilion. So you can see that, here we have this, defined, two specific play areas. It has various benches surrounded around it so that, there's places to sit and rest, or for teachers or parents to come and be able to watch. There's shade trees incorporated around the site to provide more shade as those grow and mature. And then from an equipment standpoint, you have a small kind of timber climbing tower. You have some swings, some additional, timber climbing, scramble elements, as well as these little dots here, these spinning elements. And then there's also a sandbox, incorporating a sandbox for, the younger kids if they want to play, and making it large enough that several kids can actually play in there. So that's another opportunity there as well. And then also looking at some modest places to put some landform, so that, as they come out of that pavilion, if they want, they climb up and over this little mound here that has a tree installed in it as well. And then pretty consistent in both concepts around this cluster of all the wastewater equipment, putting a low screen wall, thinking we could get colorful and creative with this so that, really it minimizes access through here, underplanting this with some, native ground covers or low shrubs, and really just making this become a zone that, contains that equipment. It's not going to interfere with that, but really minimizing or eliminating access through here. And so that the kids really are focused more on the open areas, and this stuff just kind of goes away as a bit of a backdrop. And then this is a good example of seeing a little bit more closely the pavilion with, some gravel paving around it. There's these concrete, paved bands that come through to provide good accessibility through. But then you can see there's places to put some additional picnic tables out on that pad in addition to what's under the pavilion. So these are some representative images of the equipment that we're considering for that younger playground. Oops. The log scramble, this has some netting built in for climbing. This is the smaller climbing tower, the timber tower. There's a few options for swings, a basket swing to be able to swing with friends as well as individual swings. There's also the accessible swings that you have now. We can continue with those. And there's slides off of some of the small structures. And then of course, these options for spinning, ones where you can both sit and stand, and you really have to kind of crank this curving bar to get it to turn around, or this one that's actually designed to tilt off canter so that really every time you kind of get to the peak, you speed back up again as you come around. Those are, I've tried it. It's fun and sickening at the same time, at least for an adult. All right, so transitioning now to the upper playground. And in this one, It's kind of also divided by this walkway into two main sections. So this one, again, this is the larger of the two timber towers. Again, as I said, visible as you're coming and approaching the school. And even like here, keeping the trees kind of pushed to the edge so that as kids are on this bench, they have the view back at that timber tower, and really highlighting it as a really central feature and focal point for the school and for the kids. And so what happens is you can come through, there's a gate here, access gate to get in, and then there's this curving accessible pathway on the backside, which would allow you to get into the upper level of this tower accessibly. That continues, and there's some stairs on this side so that wherever the kids come from, they can come up the stairs, come up the ramp. This slope here is even a material that would allow them to scramble and climb up that. Could potentially have some little climbing holds in there. And so that really gives them a lot of opportunity and ways to get into this tower from this little bridge or ramp. And then the tower itself has lots of opportunities for climbing inside and outside, as well as what you can see here are certain slides. There's a larger spinner element. This allows 4, 5, 6 people at once to all kind of hold on and spin together on this. We have pictures of this equipment as well. And then these are various balance beams and more log scrambles. And then for the older kids, again, getting their own basket swing to be able to get together in a group and swing in this play area. And then you can see some more opportunities for benches. And then again, this is backdropped by the rain garden and some planting on this slope. This is a generated hill in order to create the access into this tower, but otherwise this slope is coming and resolving into the plaza, and this is all fairly level through here. So this is images of the actual equipment that we're thinking of, these various climbing elements and balancing elements. These are called stilts. So it's just simple logs coming out of the ground, but they have ability to balance on these little steps that are notched in. This is an example of that larger tower, that timber tower. So you can see there's a fire pole they can climb up or shimmy down. There's climbing holds built into sides of this. And then they also get into using playful colors. And you can look at say doing the maroon and yellow kind of striation of stripes on this outside to pull out the school colors as well. And then you've got slides coming out of that structure. This is an example of coming up and being at an accessible pathway that gets you across this connector into that structure. And then again, basket swing and spinning. This is picture 5 or 6 people all on that thing together spinning around. I believe, just a few more site elements for concept A. Again, the pavilion, there are designs for that. So this is just representative, but of a similar style. The idea near that pavilion is the planting, the tree planting in the gravel with some seating and picnic tables there as well. That slide area at the far end of the hill has both these, tube slides, basically just pairs of pipes that the kids can either slide, balanced in between the pipes, or they can grab onto one like they're sliding down the banister of the stairs at home. So those, there's creative ways they can use those, as well as a wide hill slide that would allow a couple of people to go down side by side together. And then again, there's the idea of the track. That's, making a circuit or a loop around that, core field area, that multi-purpose field area. And then some ideas of linear and curving seat walls and seat benches as well. All right, so that was the end of concept A, and now we're transitioning to concept B. So this one does a few things. It tries to use a different form. So the first concept was very, very much more, geometric, a little bit more modern in how it handled some of the form. And this one is much more in a natural spirit in terms of, the walkways are all very much serpentine and kind of growing and shrinking in the width of this main pathway through the core of the site. But really the idea is that, that idea of a journey starts, as you leave the school door and kind of come and flow through the center of the site. And ultimately you can kind of come up this accessible pathway here and get to the top of this much larger knoll in this option than what the hill was in the first concept. So that's the idea of the experience and kind of approaching the journey and getting to the summit here. So this hillside is a much larger, takes a much larger chunk out of the existing play area. You can see the current playground is just slightly ghosted in underneath. And so the idea here is that creates a huge promontory for the kids. As they're looking out over the playground, they can come up to this zone here, or even kind of hop up onto this wall and even rise up a couple more feet to get even higher. So, now we have instead of the 5 or 6 or up to 7 foot slope kind of between the field level and the roadway, now you have a hill that feels a bit more domineering on the site and really helps start to define kind of the two zones by being like a 8 foot tall, up to 8 foot tall hill right here in the middle. And so the older kids playground, we're thinking in the like 2 to 6 range is keyed into that hill. And that's, where it's located with, slides and again, its own tower coming off of that keyed in. So backing up just a little bit in this concept, so other than the form, we're not doing anything major at the entrance. We're generally leaving that the way it is, although we are looking at extending the sidewalk and creating a crosswalk connection to the trails and kind of still increasing the width of this sidewalk here a bit for that arrival experience, but not redoing any of the parking and drive lanes that are out there now. And then as far as the tennis court goes, we did leave one of the tennis courts and only cut it back, halfway in order to still gain some, open field space, but it's not used for, sports or, formal games. It's a much more natural, we're calling it the meadow field. And it's, open lawn, kind of biomorphic, narrow spots, wide spots. It has some landform and some small hills and mounds, kind of paralleling the walkway to help define and separate it and create, obstacles for the kids to run up and over and circle around, while also creating, these smaller, quieter, enclosed spaces for, say, another class to gather on this seat wall together, or to sit out here as a group and have lunch, or to meet with your friends, right? So kind of a multifunctional space for, more passive or quieter active activities here versus the main field, which is currently where the existing baseball diamond is. And so we basically leave that where it is, push it over a little bit and allow that function to maintain here. So we're still increasing the width of this diagonal pathway here because, I think that's a critical aspect of both schemes. Not doing too much else to any of the other walkways other than, again, trying to just curve this corner here to allow kids to come out and flow in to a walkway that's, again, pulled away from all of the existing wastewater equipment here. And then, that becomes the start of that long kind of linear, I almost think of this as a river flowing through, the valley, right? With, a big hill over here and then some other hills kind of in mounds here. So again, that initial idea of the valley landscape, there's kind of this low point through the middle with some various landform and mounds to either side of that. So that connects all the play areas and different amenity spaces off of that curving spine. And one of them is the pavilion now over in this position over here, closer to the entrance, really kind of, celebrating an entrance into the play area, both from, again, a walkway here off of the arrival, as well as this, this one I spoke of before. And so in the middle of that, now you can kind of come all the way through this whole perforated edge whether on the sidewalk or the paving underneath the pavilion to get into the play space. So, trying to really open up the access into the play area. Now, I did kind of consider leaving the fence up for a portion of this to kind of better control access, minimize access where the wastewater equipment is, also protect the swings here. It seemed like a good place to just kind of create an edge there, have some swings there. But there's now a new defined walkway that comes in right here, as well as a connection over these parking lots. So we've got the diagonal walk with some bike racks off of that, the pavilion, a seat wall on the way in. So you can sit here and kind of be at the pavilion or looking out over the field, and also using that to define the swings in this zone here. So I mentioned before, but this is the larger, playground with the larger equipment for the, starting to get into the upper grades. And then you have, in a similar spot as the first concept, the playground for the younger kids, but looking at, different play equipment options, different orientations of that equipment. Also, as I mentioned, there's this, landform here, and that becomes another element that, they can climb up and over. Potentially, slicing through that landform with a bit of a tunnel or a channel where the kids can get into a little bit of like a ground fort per se. It's not covered, but it still allows them the ability to be down kind of 2 or 3 feet below the grade of this landform and pop up and peek out, right? And then there's different seating elements in several places through the site, whether it's formal benches or seat walls or blocks, trying to define the different play spaces and amenities. And then I believe I did mention, leaving a tennis court and the basketball court. In this scheme, I do show the Gaga pit over here on top of that wastewater equipment, which I believe we can do. But there was good discussion with the faculty of like, well, if we're trying to stay away from there, maybe we just entirely stay away from there and think of another spot for the Gaga pit. All right, so looking just briefly through the enlargements, here you can see the entrance with the widened kind of entry sidewalk. That is backdropped by a wall, and then this grade becomes a little bit lower, and you have this a rain garden in this location. So now the sidewalk here in the fields can pick up that water and treat it here before it gets piped into the existing stormwater system. You can see the bike racks in their own little pod here, some benches, and again, the pavilion with what I'm thinking is in this instance, that brick paving, the memorial paving goes underneath the pavilion as an option instead of on one of the sidewalks. And then this also shows reusing the existing storage shed or even getting a new one if needed, but that could be located along the backside of this wall so that there's still access for the sports equipment for the field or the sleds for when they want to go out sledding. Similar images to the first concept, but again, just trying to reflect on paving and the rain garden idea and memorial paving. And then an enlargement of the younger play area for the kids. So here you can see a 3-bay swing with various belt swing, the basket swing. There's some benches located along the walkways. These are the 2 existing trees. There's an existing tree here. So trying to utilize some of that existing landscaping that's out there now. And then really kind of putting in this, this formed play area defined by the various walkways. Obviously the major walkway, minor walkways kind of coming off and connecting. And you can even create some smaller loops running around some of these areas. And then in this scheme, the field is draining both towards the rain garden at the entrance over here, but also we have another, catchment swale here to allow the water to come and collect here before coming over the existing system. And that gives us an opportunity to potentially put in a bridge So as they come across the field, they can cross that bridge and come into this whole play area. And then this is that knoll with the little fort, sunken fort through the landform there. And that, one idea with that was even paving that in the little round log cakes or log cookies, as a fun natural way to pave that element. So some images of some of the equipment. We have, potentially this manufactured tunnel sitting in one side of the play area. There's look at this, 2 persons. So you can 4 people on a seesaw. So that looks like a lot of fun. And then overall, from an equipment standpoint, we've tried to go with more steel, stainless steel in this option, just to juxtapose and see how, both the kids and the parents react to it. There's still some natural wood mixed in, but for the most part, most of the equipment is more of the stainless steel. This piece here is, a climbing piece. It does have like this really nice wood, it's hard to see, but wood ramp that comes up with some handholds on it, and then various, spiral poles, nets for climbing, this kind of arcing ladder, curving climbing ladder. And then still using the basket swings, the spinning elements, and then again, this idea of this sunken little fort element, natural element, kind of sunken into the landform. And then with the larger kids play area in the meadow, so now you can really see nicely how this accessible walkway comes up. There's this, reinforced, play surfacing up at the top of the knoll. Again, a bench, a seat wall at the top of this thing to look out over this whole thing. The knoll goes up higher for sledding down here. But, from this standpoint, they can come down the slide into the play area. They can come across, come into the fort. It has its own giant slide. And then there's steps or these climbing holds that allow people to climb back up onto the top of this, probably 5 or 6 feet above the elevation here is what you are up on top of this. And then this has, kind of a nice, wall feature here. Down low, it acts as a sitting wall so that you can sit here. And then as it gets taller, it helps retain the grade and transition from, the climbing landscape to come back up to the more natural landscape with tree planting to provide shade on the backside of that. And then again, this is that more passive meadow space. We have various knolls and knobs, that could either be regular lawn or go with more of a meadow grass that's, not mowed as much, and really helps even define more the lawn space here and the seat walls that go along with that. And I should mention spinners too, right? The same large spinner there as well as some smaller spinner pieces. This is the equipment for the larger play area. That's the big tower in the 2 to 6 play area. Massive slide coming out of that. Some balancing logs, again, the spinning, the idea of climbing with some handholds up that slope. And then again, that embankment slide coming down a slope with, special surfacing on it to stabilize it. And some more just about the overall site, again, kind of from that passive landscape, trying to pull on that idea. The pathways and running around the pathways, there's not as defined a track in this one, but certainly that, linear curving, walkway through the center of the site, certainly kids will run back and forth along that, going from the school to whatever piece of equipment or play area they want to play on. And then looking at, are there opportunities for natural materials, for seat walls, and of course the pavilion as well. So that is the end of the presentation of all the concept work. It's a lot to review and digest, but at this point, if people want to come on and kind of have questions or comments, ask me to go back to a specific slide, I can. And really just, I'm here to offer more explanation or review something again or answer your questions. Looks like we do have some comments I've kind of been ignoring as I go along, but we can certainly look at those.
Yeah, Tom, just from the Q&A, we have a parent with a question. Concerned that the tube slides and larger slide could be abused by skateboarders in the summer. Is that a potential hazard?
I've not actually heard of that with these slides, mostly because I think once they get down, they're just going to fall once they hit the surfacing below. So it's not to say that they won't be crazy and try it, but it's not something that I've really ever had to experience with play equipment. I guess the flip side of that is kids will always be crazy and try to do things they shouldn't, but is there a need for, we did talk about the idea of a skate park or, a small BMX park, which Sydney, I think you had not liked that idea for this site, but, trying to make sure they have an opportunity for something that will keep them entertained so they don't start going places they shouldn't and using equipment inappropriately.
The next question is, what about teachers' sight lines and keeping eyes on kids?
Right. So that was one of the first questions we asked of the faculty, is to make sure that they respond with their critique of how both of the play options meet that requirement. And so what we've tried to do in both schemes really is open the overall site up some more, although we're certainly starting to put some more elements kind of sporadically through it. But in both schemes, we felt like the idea of the knoll, as much as it's a cool vantage point for the kids, it can also be a vantage point for the teachers. If you position a teacher up high, now you have kind of eyes everywhere. So it will be interesting to hear their take on that. And, we asked them specifically to kind of respond to, how does this feel from an operations standpoint? Does it help you? Are there issues with, visibility? And, the principal, Kristen, even mentioned earlier that like the positioning of this pavilion might restrict some of the views out of the office space into the play area. So I think, there's certainly a good question, looking for feedback from people about those issues. But I think for the most part, everything is still fairly open and visible. We're not putting really big, dense shrubs in anywhere that would, create a spot where kids could hide. Most of this is all, low planting or grass with then trees that, stick up out of that ground plane. Really in concept B, and we had a good discussion about this with the faculty earlier, is, we get up to a high point, which is actually higher than the existing slope here, right? So there's a little bit of a downhill on the backside here, but I tried to make it so that if a child was standing here, they're still generally visible. If they duck down and kind of bend down, they could potentially be, hard to see from like the bottom of the slope here, because of the size of this overall landform.
Our next one is, I'm curious which concept design the kids seem to like best.
I am too. I don't have those answers yet.
The kids are still filling out their own surveys, right? After today's presentation.
It'd be interesting to see if teachers ended up asking for a book report on the playground presentation, 200-word report. Yeah, I'm hoping by now the teachers have, finished the survey that we asked them to do with the students. I don't have those results yet. I haven't had a chance to look at them. We got anecdotally from one class, it felt like a little bit of a 50-50 split. But yeah, the intent is to have all that assessment by tomorrow when the project committee meets. I should have that for you tonight. I apologize, I don't.
That's okay. I'm sure they're still working on it. The next one is, the steel elements seem like they may not be accessible in the winter. How do you see them working?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. The swings and some of the climbing elements. As long as you can get to them they're still accessible, right? The elements themselves, certainly you might have to deal with colder hands on an element like this, where you actually are physically climbing on the steel. So that's certainly something to consider. We talked about kind of the flip side of that, which is in the summer, does some of the metal slides heat up too much and they get too hot? I don't believe you have to deal with that as much with, the tubular steel, the smaller elements, but certainly there is that possibility with the slide. So, that's one of the issues with the metal. I think from a pricing standpoint, my recommendation most likely is that you guys end up with a plastic slide. I think, we've gotten some initial pricing on equipment, and the differential between a plastic slide and a stainless steel slide would buy you a pretty decent car. So it seems like, the plastic does get warm as well, but not quite as hot as the steel. So certainly a consideration, but I don't think there's a lack of accessibility unless I'm misunderstanding the question in a degree in terms of the winter use. I think like for the swings, like there's no that doesn't have an impact in terms of the use of that element.
And this is a question after my own heart, because this is what I was thinking all day. Both designs are amazing. Is it possible to have a Gaga pit in concept A? Are we able to mix and match elements of both concepts, or is it one or the other?
I'd love to be able to say, well, no, just choose A or B, right? But everyone always wants C. So yeah, the important aspect of this meeting tonight, and a follow-up with the refined project committee tomorrow, is to say, all right, what's the core design that we want to start with, and then is there something missing from one or the other that we do need to pull in? I did not show the Gaga pit in the option A, although we know how important it is. But one thought was that could it go on the courts as an option? And if that takes up space, we had a decent discussion with the faculty of, is there another spot kind of playing off the geometry where, maybe the sidewalk kind of continues over and you end up having enough space in this corner right here where you can then kind of add the Gaga pit on its own, concrete or asphalt pad here, or even gravel, and incorporate that into the plan. So that's certainly, yes. I mean, that's the Gaga pits get so much use, and there's such a high energy activity, and they're so simple to construct, right? That, it really is worth incorporating it in somewhere. And if you want to pull elements from one to the other, we also had a discussion about the big hill in B. What happens if we like A, but we want this big hill here, right? So it gets into, well, certainly you could, it takes a bigger bite out of this field, but then, are you gonna then have just the slides, as I also have an A, and you don't have any display equipment because you still want back to A. Oops. Too far. Sorry, guys. You still want to have the play area over here, right? And there was kind of recognition that there's definitely a benefit of having this higher energy play area closer to the school, more accessible. But we could certainly look at, do you get a larger knoll over here that has somewhere, and then, a similar location as this or off the end that those slides.
We just have a similar question, which I think you answered, which is it possible to merge concept elements from A and B? So we already went over that one.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next question is, how do wooden elements shown in concept A structures hold up over time? Will they require treatment or more maintenance over time?
Right. And we touched on this a little bit at the last meeting when we were kind of getting into the discussion of the same element, right? And really, for the most part, what the companies are using now is this black locust material. And that's the element that they're using primarily for most of the structural elements. the elements that go directly into grade. And, black locust is a super rot resistant, super dense wood, and it has really, really good longevity in the outdoor elements. I did a playground a few years ago where that's the material that we used as basically the curbing around the entire width of the play area. So it's a good, material. It's natural though, so you might get some checking, you might get some splinters. There might be some need for some maintenance, more maintenance of that element than say the metal would be, right? But there's also a bit of a premium for buying that much steel out of the gate versus the timber. So, for the most part, all the equipment, all the selections, it's not with the short term in mind, it's still with the long term. And, so there's good warranties on the material. There's certainly some maintenance care that needs to be taken after, but, that it's still intended to last for, at least several decades. I would say too, if we go and look at, some of these, like this piece here. Oh, come on. Got to get my controls down. Where did I go here? I was trying to zoom in. I can't zoom in. Anyways, stop. All right, so this tower here, there is just so much that, this company packs into this from an element standpoint. And, I mentioned this a bit earlier, but even within the core of this thing, there's, multiple platforms, ultimately working your way up to the slide. You can kind of see in the background here that there's some mesh and netting. So there's places to, climb inside of that and balance. There's little, almost like swing platforms, as well as climbing elements on the outside, climbing nets to get up there. So I'm really impressed at the amount of different movements and activities that they incorporate into those towers. And they're still not inexpensive, but for the really nice kind of natural character and aesthetic they carry, they're both super creative on the modern side, while being really engaging.
Okay, next question. What surface material is being considered for under the play structures? And my kid would love to see a tetherball pole integrated into the design.
Well, I think you already have tetherball poles out there, right? So it looks like you just need a new rope and ball, right? So we could certainly get that back in. And then as far as surfacing goes, that is, there's a couple of factors. There's two options. One is, as you're seeing here, the wood mulch, the fiber reinforced wood mulch. This is a specialty product. It's not just like bark mulch you get at the garden center for your yard. It's it's still natural, still wood chips, but it's shredded and chipped in a way that it gives itself pretty good structure as it goes in. And so once it's compacted, it becomes stable enough to provide accessibility. So that means, once you transition off the sidewalk, you can still have access to the various equipment pieces. That is your more inexpensive option, although it still gets some price to it. The other would be, this kind of rubber material. There's also, it's hard to see, but kind of on the slope right here, there's some rubber involved as well. That's poured in place from rubber. So that's the other material. I'm kind of leaning in this direction that most of the surfaces are probably the fiber reinforced mulch. We might use some rubber in key locations that get the most wear and tear. For example, on the slope coming up to the towers, we could even look at, at like the slide exits or around the swings, doing some creative shapes that allow, you don't get the typical divot in the mulch that you get from swings and sliding out, right? So we could look at that path as a way to kind of simplify the wear and tear at some of those critical access points. But for the most part, we're looking most likely just from a cost standpoint at the fiber reinforced mulch, and then also having discussions. Elena was, talking to several reps today about, the issue about drainage and freeze thaw and relative to both the mulch, the wood mulch and the rubber. So that's still a bit of a work in progress, but that's the direction we're leaning.
So it looks like our Q&A and our chat have slowed down. I don't see anything currently. I'd be curious just to hear from our parents who are on. The talk in the school a little bit with the kids today was, do you like A? Do you like B? I don't know. I know there's a survey coming, but if you have any first impressions, this would be a great time to share them if you like.
Or which parts do you want to mix and match?
Yeah. Okay. We have such fantastic designs. Thank you. A few thoughts. One, the option to have both a gym class and a recess group out at the same time seems like a huge win. Two, love how you're incorporating the natural hillside for sledding. I like how A has a sidewalk for access where it seems like B didn't, but the height and dominance of the big kid structure in B seems great. 4, I love the big hill in B, but overall like the layout of A. 5, extending the entry area with a covered waiting area seems great. And 6, I like the pavilion placement more in A with the clear, direct, wider walkway towards the play areas. Awesome.
Sounds like we're starting to build some consensus for a really big hill down here. I think the discussion of access, if I understand correctly, there is an accessible walkway that gets you to the top of the hill, kind of coming off the track in this scheme here. And then if we look at B, it comes around the other side. You have this walkway, which then it starts here and starts to curve its way up over here. So both of them have accessibility up to the top of that landform.
Okay. Any other comments?
I saw something about the outdoor classroom, right?
Yeah, I think we were just clarifying in that question, the outdoor classroom, our existing outdoor classroom, plus
Right.
the addition of the new pavilion.
Right. So there's the existing enclosed classroom in the back. You then gain the pavilion as a secondary kind of multifunctional space for both learning, I've been thinking about for eating, gathering, and then, there's other options, like I mentioned, this meadow space with the wall, that could be another place for learning. And there's also, the consideration, well, it's not a kind of defined amphitheater with, benches, like you could still gather, the whole school if you wanted, or, several classes on the slope in either of the schemes, for, gathering. Or, there's the idea in that elementary school I did in, I'm going the wrong way, in Montpelier, they had kind of a similar like big oval, right? This one's clearly much larger than they have, but they like to line their whole class up, on the oval, and teachers in the middle talking to them. So there's creative ways to kind of look at the site design and the layout and think about what are ways that you could potentially gather the groups together, both for meetings as well as that outdoor learning.
a comment in the chat coming in. I love that there's something for everyone. It's hard to accommodate K through 6 as their interests and abilities are different. I love the nature incorporated. It's kind of an extension into the woods, and we visit there frequently. And then another comment of, I like the layout of B with the concepts from A.
Love to hear from whoever asked that to elaborate a bit more.
Okay. If that's your comment, if you're willing to elaborate, or with anybody who's on, if it's easier for you to speak, I can always just bring you in to speak at any time. And maybe that is easier for an elaboration if you're willing. So I'll check with that person. I'll read the next Q&A. I'm drawn to concept A. However, I worry about extending the walkways and taking some of the parking. The car lines and parking issues get backed up a lot, and I can't imagine losing that space. And then the next comment is, I also love the idea of the racetrack / walkway in concept A. I think it's a great way to encourage kids to even just walk or do laps during recess. Wondering too, if it could also be used for their mile run in the gym.
I did, test me here. I did a quick calculation. I think the total loop is like 550 or 650 feet. So I think it took at least 3 or 4 laps around to get to 100 meters or something. I'm sure though we could look at that and try to work with, say, the PE teacher to say, all right, what could we mark out some of the distances or lengths to get to some standard race length. But it is a fun way, kind of a good point to say, all right, let's put little mile markers along this whole thing, right? And have the kids kind of continue to run or walk around.
Okay, so we have Anita Gudakonda who's going to come in and speak to elaborate on her mix and match between A and B.
Great.
Hi, Anita.
Hi, Sydney. I liked that in like B with it left like the one side of the field kind of like empty, like in so like if you look, since A's here, like I liked how like one of the tennis courts was actually kept. And then as it I liked in B how like one of the tennis courts was kept, and then like how the field on the right side was empty, where it's like if PE and recess were out, it's like recess could use like all the stuff on one section of the playground while like recess was happening. If there was like an organized, sport happening for recess, would be on the right, and there wouldn't be like interference between the two. Also mostly in like this, I guess like the steel kind of, I don't know if I'm a big fan of, but I did like all the like the wooden concepts of the playground from A. So like if those were like on the perimeter, like it looked, I don't know, it just looked neater and nicer to me.
So when you say, so I'm understanding the concepts now from B, but you said you kind of started your question by saying you liked the layout of A. So what is it about the layout?
I liked the layout of B with the concepts from A, like the fixtures that were set up, like.
Gotcha. So
yeah, because like with B, like I mean the rain garden, then I'm just like, I don't know if it's still water, if that's like a lot of like mosquitoes, but here it looks like all the stuff was like right towards like the school section, and I kind of liked it where it was more like sectionalized, like
gotcha.
all the recess could happen like on one side and like PE could happen on the other.
Yeah, so the equipment really kind of comes in like, this is that division point, right? Or you could even say there's 3. There's like the field zone, there's, the active play zone, and then back to a little bit of the court zone here, right? But what you're saying is you like how this actually isn't up against the building, and it's used, we're using this to kind of separate the field from everything else.
Yeah.
Great, okay. Thank you.
Okay, something else just coming in on chat is, let's see. I like the open layout of A with the pathway around the field. It might be nice to make the walkway go all the way around the two fields to make it more amenable for quote unquote lap work. I also think the wood plastic play structures are preferable to the steel due to heat tolerance, cost, and aesthetic issues.
Great. Yeah, you know, we're actually pretty close with the idea of saying, all right, maybe this walkway could, you know, just kind of continue this last little leg. And you do get a larger circuit all the way around for sure.
And one more comment to the last comment was, agree with the last comment, not a huge fan of the steel. Wood feels just more natural, warmer, and love the tie-in to the timber history in Grantham. The next one is it important to keep a tennis court? I don't think there are any at the rec park. And that is one of our big questions. Do we keep one of the courts or not?
That's, I don't know if it's $1 million question, but it's one of the critical questions, right?
Right.
You know, I think the other way to look at that is, what do you gain by removing either one or two of them? And, you know, in this concept A, you know, we're able to kind of maximize the fields, have the, you know, the soccer field over in this location, so it's further away from everything, and the school can really kind of utilize this whole zone for recess with, you know, the more organized sports happening over here. You know, the alternative with B is that you keep one of the tennis courts, but you gain a little bit more space for the playground still, and do some more kind of interesting landform and site design here. But, you know, really the reality is that, you know, the existing tennis courts there, right? Like in both schemes, you can almost do everything that's here without even affecting the tennis courts. You know, the circulation here, we could certainly, like, you know, relook, you know, if you were even going to keep both, you know, you could still get it all to function for the most part in the same manner. But, you know, that question about, you know, do we at least have one court for the school's use, for the town's use? And are we gaining enough to get rid of one or two? You know, I definitely think how tight and enclosed this end is, and like this little sliver through here between the existing fence and you know, between the fence of the tennis court and the edge of the playground, like it's such an unusable space, right? And even just by opening this up a little bit more, I feel like it helps a lot with the scale of the overall space. It seems like, you know, we should definitely at least consider getting rid of one. The question becomes, depending on, you know, this layout A versus layout B question, and is this enough field space, you know, helps determine if we keep the one and have more of a minor addition of the play area over here versus the larger field.
Next comment in chat is, I agree with the wood elements. It blends in with the environment and plays on the history of our community. It helps with enriching creativity and finding natural play spaces in their daily lives.
I think we're coming to a pretty definitive conclusion on the wood from every group we've met with today. It sounds like there's strong support for those structures. All right, is there anything else? If we had to take a vote, how would it land?
You want to do like a mock vote? This could be our sample size.
We could, but I mean, that's also a good reminder that, we'll have that survey available, which does ask for feedback, about the designs, about some of the aspects of, the various elements. It does ask to vote for one or the other. Or, that C option, which is, mix and match, right? So, we will get some good kind of metrics out of that, but it is always fun when you're in an audience to hear how people are leaning.
I can actually do a quick poll.
Oh, that'd be great.
Let me see. And I hope you don't mind. Well, should I do A or B, or am I going to say A, B, or C? Because it sounds like it's C, right?
Sure.
Or do you really want to have people lean toward?
No, it'd be interesting to see how many people weigh, one complete design versus another versus a mixture.
Okay, so. Okay, the poll is going to be launched. Have you done these with your other groups before?
We a few times, but not as often as we should. They're a really interesting way to kind of engage an audience right there and get immediate feedback.
Okay, we have 100% participation. We have 14% for A, 14% for B, and 71% for C, combined features from both.
Sounds like we got our work cut out for us. We're trying to combine and blend them together.
It would be much easier if our group said A, perfect as it is, right?
That's what makes things interesting, right? Is seeing what is attractive to people. So, I think what to dig into that, results and see is, the idea of from a site design standpoint, is it one or the other versus some of the people tonight said, well, I like, B, but I don't like the steel equipment, right? So I think we hear pretty strongly that, the wood family of equipment is most desired. And then really, I think, understanding what layout is most beneficial. And again, based on that discussion of the tennis we just had, what do we do functionally over on that end of the site if we decide to keep one court, get rid of, just one and have more limited space. So.
Two more comments before we say goodnight. One is, if I had to vote tonight, I'd vote A with a Gaga pit. And then the next one, which I will certainly emphasize, is we just want to reiterate our gratitude as a community. It's clear you've really done a lot of work listening, incorporating feedback, and adding in your expertise. We're so excited for this project.
That's really great to hear, and heard nothing but good feedback from Sydney and Kristen and some of the other teachers today. This is certainly, as we said, coming into it, a group lift. We're certainly doing a lot of the work in terms of the design, but, for everyone to stay on point and show up and provide comment, provide feedback, and stay focused on, providing that feedback when it's critical and when we need it, allows us to kind of get our work done and meet, the requirements of what you guys are looking for, which is, for creative design one, but on the the schedule that's been outlined. So it's been a fun process, and we're going along and we're getting closer. So it's good to feel that we're on track. We've got some creative ideas, and I guess the best result is that we have two ideas that are worth pushing together into one, and that one of them wasn't such a bad design that you clearly said, no, we want A over B. So it's good to see that there's creative ideas in both that people are attracted to.
No, it's a testament to what you've done. There's so much that everybody loves about both designs.
All right, well, thank you guys for your time and for listening to me spiel on about the concepts to, get you guys caught up to speed. Now you can all, have a very thorough, engaging conversation with your children if they're either still awake or tomorrow when they wake up. And by hopefully tomorrow night, we'll have, a good discussion with the committee and really know how to piece these together and start working on that. And I think what we'll do, Sydney, is probably by early next week, say, all right, these are our final takeaways from this, concept presentation and our understanding of where we're going. So at least when we get to the end of the week, people know what to expect.
Perfect. Sounds good. And I will see you tomorrow night at 7, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
We'll close the week out with one more meeting on this.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a great night, everybody.
Hey, thank you guys. Good night.